started. Welcome, thanks everybody for joining. This is the Bikes Count on Campus webinar using data to support bicycle-friendly universities. And just a couple quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Like I said a moment ago, attendees are muted, but feel free to type questions into the chat box for now. Also feel free to keep your cameras off for now if you'd like. I know that Zoom fatigue is real, so sit back and relax during the first half of today's webinar. But during the second half, we're going to ask everybody to turn your cameras on and engage with us during the open discussion. And we're also going to do a couple polls throughout the webinar to learn more about you all. And if you'd like, please put your school name or your affiliation in your name in Zoom so people can see where folks are coming from. And I'm going to hand it over to Olivia to walk us through the agenda.
Thanks, Amelia. So my name is Olivia. I work with EcoCounter. I can see a few of the attendees we've talked before. So hello to everyone I've spoken to before and to people we're meeting today. So for the way that the webinar is going to run today, we're going to have 3 different presentations. And then at the end of the presentations, we will go through any questions that have been posed. So have a little discussion at the end. And I welcome everyone to use the chat box or message feature if they would like to submit questions that way, or you can just save them for the end. So as Amelia noted, we're just asking people to have their cameras off and you're muted during the presentation moment or presentations. But at the end, we will welcome everyone to just have their cameras on and we can have a more open discussion and hopefully we can answer any questions that anyone has at that time. For the first presentation, we will be starting off with Amelia from the League of American Bicyclists. I'm going to bring up her bio here. Oh, and another thing I wanted to say before we start, we're going to be sharing a folder of resources in the Google Drive after the session. So it's going to include just some resources that are going to be spoken about today that will help with doing any bicycle data collection on campuses and just some other like kind of count related documents. So you will have access to that after the webinar, and I think it will also include just the slides that our presenters will be using today. But for now, we can get started. So Amelia is going to be doing a quick introductory presentation, and Amelia is the director of the League of American Bicyclists Bicycle Friendly America program. And before joining the League in 2013, she worked as the campus bicycle coordinator for the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I hope I said that correctly, where she got to experience the other side of the BFU program from the campus perspective. So without further ado, I will welcome Amelia to start with her presentation.
Great, thanks so much, Olivia. And as I do that, I'm gonna ask everybody to let us know where you're coming from in terms of your affiliation or role with your campus. So you'll see a poll pop up. I will leave this up and running while I talk, and I'll share the results in just a minute so we can see who all is here. And like I said earlier, feel free to put your school name in your name on Zoom as well. All right, so I'm just going to share a little bit of the League's perspective about why data is so important. If you're not familiar with the League of American Bicyclists, we're a national nonprofit bike advocacy organization leading the movement to create a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. And the Bicycle Friendly America program that I run ranks all 50 states every other year. And then we have application systems for communities, businesses, and universities to receive recognition and feedback. So it's both about recognizing all the great things that these places are doing for bicycling already, and also giving them the feedback and the motivation to improve. So the Bicycle Friendly University program has been around since 2011, and currently we have 212 bicycle-friendly universities awarded in 47 states and DC. And I'll put these links in the chat so that folks can see, if you're curious, what universities are in your state. You can explore our map. Oops, sorry, my copy and paste isn't working now. I'll add those afterwards. And then you can also learn more about the BFU program at the link here. And I'm also going to quickly share the poll results. We're mostly staff from campuses, some local government folks, and some other. If you typed other, feel free to put it in the chat what your role is. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the poll results. All right, jumping back to my presentation. So the Bicycle Friendly America application criteria is organized into what we call the 5 E's: engineering, encouragement, education, evaluation and planning, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. And you can learn more about those on our website as well. And the Bicycle Friendly University program really looks at data primarily through the evaluation and planning section, but it's important in all 5 E's. And I'll explain a little bit about that. So bike data really matters for so many reasons: benchmarking and tracking your progress, quantifying the related tangible benefits of bicycling, whether that's emission reductions, cost savings, health improvements, and so on. Making the case for bicycling investments, whether you're showing that there's demand for something, whether you're showing that there's a need for better infrastructure or more bike racks or all-weather maintenance, or that the events and staffing that you're hoping to do have an audience. There's a lot of cases to be made with better data. Identifying problem areas where crashes are happening or where people aren't using the facilities that exist because they're substandard. And then after you make improvements, showing before and after comparisons to say, look, these investments worked and this was worth it. Evaluating demographics and equity, seeing who's using your facilities or who's going to your events, and analyzing, why it's not representative if it isn't, or what could be done to make it more equitable or accessible to more people. Setting ambitious, measurable goals can't be done without knowing sort of where you're starting from. And it's just a really critical part to the planning process. What do we mean by data collection? So there's so many different methods of collecting data, whether that's a bike registration system, on-street automated bike counters, an RFID system like the ZAP program that University of Minnesota uses, app-based programs like Strava, or websites like Love to Ride, street light cameras that collect information and counts for you, bike share system usage data, manual counts, bike parking audits, crash data, data on your classes and your event participation. All of these things count. And in fact, there's a question on the BFU application that captures how the campus is collecting bike data on their campus. And this is just a snapshot from our most recent round. We have a number of universities and colleges currently under review in the BFU program. And so this was how the current round answered this question. So I don't have correlations with award levels for these yet, but it'll be interesting to do that analysis as well. But as you can see, commuter surveys are the most common data collection source currently for BFU applicants, followed by bike registration systems, periodic bike rack counts, periodic manual counts, and so on. 23% say they have no formal tracking whatsoever, which is really interesting. We also have a question about satisfaction surveys for students and staff about bicycling on their campus. And interestingly, the majority of campuses don't currently do this. So this is something we really encourage schools to do. And we have some great examples of how this has been done well on other campuses. The resource folder that Olivia mentioned will include some of these examples that we've really liked from the last few years, including this one you see on the screen from Michigan State University, which was a socio-mobility survey, looking at how people get around and how they want to get around. UC Davis actually does a survey every year, going back to 2007, a campus travel survey, and it gets at not only how people currently travel, but how they want to travel, getting at things like barriers to cycling, cycling aptitude, as you can see the question here on the screen, potential for bicycling and potential for infrastructure and program improvements. So these are some really great examples that I hope you check out in the resource folder that we'll share. We also ask about crash and fatality data, and this is another area where a lot of schools need to improve on. 6% don't have data on fatalities on their campus, which I find shocking. That seems like a very important thing. Most cities collect this data, but campuses should, be aware of the numbers and be able to report it on the BFU application. We also ask about general crashes between bikes and automobiles, and then non-automobile related bicyclist crashes. So this is anything from a bike ped crash to somebody crashing on a pothole by themselves, no one else on the road. And a really important thing to mention here is that making it easy for student, staff, and faculty and community members to report this kind of data is really essential. So that you can do analysis like this, making it easy for somebody to say, yeah, I'm, crashed my bike on that pothole or on that trail that, really needs to be upgraded, so that you can see the areas on your campus that need to be improved and make the case for those improvements to be made. I mentioned a lot of cities already collect this data, so partnering with your local community. This is just one great example here in DC. There's an open source GIS source available, so all the campuses here in DC share this link often when they apply to the BFU program, so there might be an equivalent for your community. Also, local bike advocates often have good systems for collecting and helping to track this data and doing their own reports for their city. So this is an example from St. Louis, from the organization TrailNet. And then finally, I wanted to remind everyone and sort of make the case that bicycle-friendly universities are a really exciting place for data collection, because there's this component of the academics and the research where you've got the potential to partner with professors and students on using your data to do really interesting things. So working with a class or a researcher or a student who's looking for a dissertation topic. So I encourage all the campuses on the call today to think about that, but also all the communities. I know we saw some local government, city and county officials are on the call today. So thinking about partnerships that you could do with the campuses in your community to do, improve your data analysis. And it's just an exciting thing about the BFU program. So with that, here are some links to learn more about the League, the BFU program, and related resources. And I will put all of these links in the chat afterwards, including this bit.ly link is the folder that Olivia mentioned. So that is all for me, and I will pass it back to Olivia. And while she's speaking, I will also launch the next poll so we can hear from the audience of who's doing bike counts and who isn't. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Amelia. So next up, we have our presenter from EcoCounter, my colleague, Matt. And Matt, you can go ahead and put your video on. Thanks. Okay, so Matt is the marketing strategist for EcoCounter in Montreal. As a year-round cyclist, Matt's role at EcoCounter revolves around ensuring organizations have the tools necessary to collect and communicate impactful bicycle count data. Outside of work, you can find Matt mountain biking, ski touring, or at the Flat Bike Collective, where he's been a volunteer for 8 years. So Matt, okay. You can go ahead and share your screen. I'll let you know if I can see it.
Sounds good. Thanks, Olivia. I will share my screen now. You can see my screen and you can hear me okay?
Yes, looks good. Sounds good.
And you can see me in presentation mode now.
Like magic.
Great. Thank you. Well, thanks for the introduction, Olivia, and thanks for kicking us off like that, Amelia. I think I'm really going to pick up exactly where Amelia has left off and sort of take a really high-level view of the importance of collecting bike data on campus and really focus on, just like Amelia did, sharing resources with you. So, every campus is different and every university setting is different. There's certainly no one-size-fit-all model, just like there aren't with bike data collection for municipalities. So we're trying to share with you as many resources and best practices as we can for you to take back to your university campus to make it more bike friendly. So just really quickly, I want to share who we are at EcoCounter. So We design and manufacture bike and pedestrian counters. So those are the physical counters that you see on the street, be it temporary or permanent bike counters or large display counters. We make those ourselves, we design those ourselves, and we produce them in-house. We also work with leading organizations across North America and across Europe to develop those count programs, so leading municipalities and then leading advocacy organizations like the League of American Bicyclists that we have been a partner with for a few years now, maybe 3 years, 4 years now, mostly on their bike-friendly community program, but this year for the first time partnering with them to support the bicycle-friendly university program, which has been really interesting to learn the different needs of university campuses. It's certainly been a learning experience for us too. And with that, we aim to enable a data-driven approach to bike and pedestrian planning overall, sharing the importance of data for making more bike and pedestrian-friendly communities and universities. So data is an essential tool to support bicycle-friendly campus initiatives and to support bicycle-friendly university applications, just like Amelia has already mentioned. And there are a whole host of reasons why you would collect data on campus. Again, some of them are very similar to why a municipality or a city or a town may want to collect that data, but they're just a little bit different too. University campuses, in many cases, are the end-use facilities, so they're the destinations, as opposed to more like places that people pass through. So that sort of changes the need for bike data collection. But we can think of the reasons why you'd want to collect bike data on campus as really from the most simple, like having a baseline understanding of mode share on campus, all the way to more complex needs, which are sort of informing longer term climate sustainability objectives and working with nearby transportation agencies to inform the infrastructure surrounding the campus itself. But the old adage that if you don't count, it doesn't count, it really does still apply on university campuses as much as it does outside the campus on the active transportation infrastructure too. So I'm just going to really give a super high level view of 4 different types of bike data collection and really try and share some of those best practices. You'll notice that in my slides at the bottom, I have a relevant source or a relevant guide or something. Those are all in that link that both Amelia and Olivia have mentioned. There's a packet of best practices for you to download, and there's really good stuff in there. So whether you're starting out right now collecting your first bike data, or you've been doing it for years and you're already BFU gold, then there's probably something for you in there. So manual counts. Manual counts are volunteer-led efforts to understand how many people are cycling at a particular point at a screen line or at a cordon. And universities are really great places for that because you have such a large supply of volunteers and students who can be engaged in the process. The example given here is from the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point, which conducts their, according to their report, they conduct their manual counts 2 times per year at different locations around the campus. And 2 times per year tends to be the best practice for collecting that data in the springtime, for example, in May, and then in the fall semester, for example, in October, excuse me. Generally want to find a day that is sort of representative of traffic, or representative of a good level of bicycle volumes, for example, a Tuesday, and capturing different times of the day, such as the morning peak at let's say 7 to 9 a.m. or 7 to 10 a.m. and the afternoon peak at 3 to 7 p.m. at different locations around the campus. In this particular case, the University of Wisconsin has even a guide tally sheet that you can go and sort of use and apply. They really have a lot of great best practices for you. It's also an interesting time to quite easily capture some other qualitative data, such as demographic data, or more bicycle use data, such as are they riding a rideshare bicycle, or are they riding a personal bicycle, carrying a child on the bicycle, wearing a helmet, perhaps an age band and a gender, and things like that. Really nice, quick win way to capture baseline understanding of how cycling is happening year over year and how cycling is changing on campus. The next type of data I want to talk about is survey data. Amelia mentioned this already, but another really strong way to capture either a baseline understanding of campus transportation landscape, or if you've been doing it before, how that is changing over time. So you can think of a few different types of surveys. We can think of a dedicated bike and pedestrian survey, so focusing the question specifically on the needs of cyclists on campus. Do you find there are enough safe access to campus? Is there enough bike parking for you? What are you looking for? Capturing those specific needs, or thinking about it more broadly in terms of a general campus transportation survey, how people get to campus, the overall mode share of people accessing the campus, and then tying that into sort of like broader questions about campus and transportation planning. If tackling it on the bigger scale, you could consider partnering with different departments around the university. Perhaps it's the sustainability department and tie it into mode share and greenhouse gas emission targets, the bike collective, the campus and space planning, things like that. But yeah, surveys really a great way to sort of capture a bigger picture, and I've added a couple of resources in there for you too. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about bike parking and sort of like bicycle rack counts, which are really maybe out of everything we're talking about, the most quick win way to understand the number of people, at least with bicycles on campus, or you can assume have cycled to campus. So in this case, in a bicycle parking count, many of the same principles still apply from a manual count, in that you want to do it on a day that is representative. So, again, maybe a Tuesday, maybe in the middle of the semester with fair weather, and sort of taking note of all of those different variables about that day. Is it raining? Is there an event on campus? The different location you are around the campus, and taking note of the characteristics of the bike rack to make sure that your data is nice and consistent year over year. In this particular example, pulling from the University of Washington in Seattle, which has been doing campus bike rack count since 1995. Really, really, really nice data collection methodologies, and even have been mapping around campus the rate at which those different bike racks are utilized at one particular moment. Are they not used at all? Are they 50% used, or are they over capacity? And therefore, we can imagine ways in which that data is used to inform the needs of future bike parking, and understand how people are sort of getting to those final facilities, and using campus to what is their destination on campus, excuse me. So yeah, when doing those bike rack counts, really taking account of all of the different variables of the day, storing that data really nicely and tracking it year on year, just like the University of Washington does here. Again, the report is in the link for you. Lastly, I want to talk about automated bike counters. So obviously it's what we specialize in, and there's really some interesting uses of automated bike counters on university campuses. Benefits of an automated bike counter is that they collect data 24/7. They're continuously collecting data, always capturing the volume of cyclists entering or leaving campus if you put it on the entranceway. Automated counters can be permanent, installed in the ground full-time, or they can be temporary, that is put out for as little as 2 weeks at a time, like you see in the tube counter in the photo. And different types of automated counters can count pedestrians, or they can count cyclists, or they can count both and distinguish between the two. When thinking about best practices of where to put those counters on campus, we can think of entranceways being probably the most important place to count, understanding how many people are entering and exiting, that is in and out of your campus by location, and therefore understanding the different ways in which volumes are flowing in and out of campus. Mobile counters can quite easily be deployed for special events, or we've even seen cases where sort of a few mobile counters, like tube counters, are shared across the university, across different departments. Maybe it's shared among the engineering department, the School of Planning, and the campus space management folks, and they share those counters and use it for different needs, and also as a way to sort of like train young planners on a very tangible and useful tool for their professional career ahead. So lots of benefits for automated counters on campus. One example, and I only just came across this last week actually, is a new study. It's a master's thesis that came out of the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, so here in Canada. And the authors set out to understand, just do very, very specific coordinate counts of how people are entering and exiting campus. And I thought it was a really nice, like concrete, clear, simple study of like using data to inform maintenance and inform active transportation on campus. So they set up counting stations at 6 different entrance points and entrance and exit points on campus, and sort of like classified them by what type of infrastructure it was at that particular site, and got a really nice baseline understanding of how people were entering and exiting and by what mode. Their focus in particular was on winter and how winter changed people's mode share choice on campus, and therefore using that data to encourage people to walk and bike more in the winter and inform winter maintenance practices such as plowing on that active transportation infrastructure. Again, the study is in the Dropbox. It's really interesting. I'm going to close by just mentioning one other thing, something that Amelia has also mentioned, the connection to the broader community, the connection to active transportation outside of campus. Data can play a really interesting role here too, because we know that many municipalities collect bike count data, and therefore there are opportunities for data sharing across university campuses and with municipalities. Data collection, can also inform the need for municipal facilities. So that is bike parking. Perhaps people are leaving bikes at university gates or in the neighborhood around universities. That has like significant implications for the municipality itself. And also, those screen line counts at entrances really will inform the need for active transportation infrastructure around the campus. We know that most people spending 90% of their time on the bike going to campus or leaving campus, maybe it's only 10% of the time on campus itself. So the way that people are entering and exiting and using streets coming up to campus really is very significant for the surrounding community. And we know that in the data, lastly, because this summer we were working with the city of Charlottesville, where UVA is, and sort of like digging into their data and trying to capture some high-level trends about cycling year over year in the city. And noticed some really interesting trends in the summer versus the fall. And summer tends to be a much more popular time for cycling than like darker, rainier, colder days in the fall. But in Charlottesville, bike counts are 22% higher during the semester, during the week, than it is during the fall break. That's because people are using bicycles to get across the city, to get to school, to get to campus. Important links between the municipality and the university campus. And with that, I'll pass it over to Aaron, who will talk about some on-the-ground experience collecting bike data. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt. And next up we have Aaron Fudge, who'll be presenting. Aaron is the Alternative Transportation Manager for Colorado State University. He serves on the Association for Commuter Transportation Board of Directors and has achieved TDMCP and CAPP certifications. He is also a league certified instructor. I'll pass it over to Aaron. Aaron, I can see your screen. Looks good.
Great. You hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Well, hey, glad to be here. I know we're trying to keep these presentations short, so I'll flip through my slides pretty quickly and look forward to your questions. I was asked to give a university case study in terms of how we manage data, and I'll give you a quick look at that. I would say our strategy for managing data is, what are those year-over-year changes? Each year at a university brings some different change in commuting behavior, and we want to stay on top of that. So year-over-year is one thing we're always looking at. What are those anomalies that come up, and do we have strong enough data sets to look for anomalies when we may not be they may not be apparent to us? We always are using data for current and future planning. Vision Zero is another one that I think for us is data has become a huge support for that. And then of course, I think Amelia started with just being able to tell this story, remembering that, you know, people can't observe every behavior on your campus. And so having data to back it up is huge to build support. So a couple things that we do, annually we do a cordon study. So we actually will put video cameras at 30 some intersections on our campuses, and we will track turning movements for a full day so we can identify peak movements by bike, by pedestrian, and by vehicular movements. And gosh, it is so revealing to see you know, behavior at the snapshot in time. It has helped us immensely, making the case for better infrastructure, you know, better education programming, etc. We have a student team of educators that kind of work at different trails and intersections on our campus, and you know, we'll track things like engagements with individuals around our campus. We'll look at, they'll also do mode counts depending on the location that they're at. They'll do rack counts when they go out for the different lessons that they have. So hey, if you have student staff and they're working on your behalf, they might as well be collecting data at the same time. I mentioned before and after studies. This is a project that we just were awarded $700,000 in grant funding for a separated trail and a bike roundabout at the north end of it. And I used some of our counter data to tell the story that, look, year over year, we're moving, you know, tens of thousands of people per month through that intersection to the north. That is going to feed into this corridor. So being able to say, hey, look, we're moving people today. We want to make this area safer, and then making projections about induced demand based on previous demand is really useful, and I think from a grant perspective, really helpful. We also track our crashes, our tickets, and our injuries. So our police department tracks crashes and tickets. Those all get reported and placed in a GIS database by location. And then we also, through the hospital on campus, we track injuries that get reported through an intake tablet. And if they flag their injury as related to bike or scooter or walking, they're asked to put a dot in the map where this injury occurred. We use data to justify engineering studies, which, you know, we all have great ideas and are trying to improve our campuses, but in the end, you need to get these projects to design. And justifying engineering studies, you know, an engineering study could be 10 to 30 grand, depending on the design that you're trying to achieve. This is a roundabout on our campus that we just recently constructed. And we needed data to make the case for why this roundabout was needed. Tabling exercises. We're at a university. You have the ability to see a lot of people in a quick time period. Here is a mapping exercise that we did a couple years back. You know, if you got a set of bike lights to hand out to your students, I mean, we literally had 250 people at this one tabling exercise. So take advantage of the direct contact with your university users by having tabling exercises. So I wanted to go a little deeper into our counter data, because we do have EcoCounters on campus, and I'll just tell you how we use that data. First, I would say, you know, through your bike master planning, come up with a deployment plan for your counters. You can see, you know, back in 2014, we had identified, you know, about 15 locations on campus and off campus. Today we're at about 9 of those where we were able to fund counters. So get this into your master planning first to actually deploy these. So let me just show you a couple different stories we can tell with our counter data. One of them is the class change. And you know, the image in front of you is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday graph, just looking at how our classes turn over. And you can see this counter was, you know, has these huge pulses in 15-minute blocks where our infrastructure just gets overwhelmed in certain locations on campus, justifying wider trails. It may help us justify a new trail, trying to distribute this load. So here is what a Tuesday, Thursday looks like. Tuesday, Thursday, typically longer classes. So those peaks are kind of spread out a little bit more throughout the day. But again, tell the story about, you know, do you have the capacity to move the people that you need to? Seasonally, I think it was mentioned earlier, you can see on this x-axis, we're just looking at, you know, these months, and you get to the return of our students, right? And what I'm looking for here is the campus permeable? Are we still welcoming to the community, or are we a barrier for those trying to navigate our campus? Here you can see in the summer months, in the absence of our students, that, you know, we have commuters that use our campus and probably make up some percentage of the folks that are commuting during the rest of the year. This is a way for us to look at COVID and the impacts of COVID, right? You can see that in 2020, we had, pretty strong ridership, and then this cliff that just kind of happened right with COVID. We go through the year. We did have students on campus, but at a much lower percentage than we normally have. And then, of course, you see this year, 2021. We shut our campus down, and then you see the return of students after the summer. So you can tell a story about COVID and, dispel some disbeliefs that, well, no one's riding their bike right after COVID, which clearly isn't true. Another one in Colorado is weather. And I think it's, these counters do a really good job, I think, telling a story about what it takes to plow a campus and why it's so important. Here you can see a story that was written. What does it take to, for CSU to get a snow day, right? So it's important to our campus, of course, to have this discussion. We have priority plow routes on our campus, and an expectation that our campus is plowed 7:30 the day after a snow event. So here is, a look at EcoCounter's current dashboard, and what I'm showing here is a snow event that occurred on a Monday, and that snow event brought about 9 inches of snow. And as you can see, our bike ridership went down. What I'm looking for is that second circled bar graph there. And I'm trying to show that after we plowed, the bikes returned, right? And if your campus is consistent and plows well, you're sending a positive message, reinforcement message that, hey, you can be safe and ride to campus because you know that we are going to plow it for you. And you can see on this graph, the temperature the day that the biking went back up on the 3rd, that morning it was 10, roughly 10, 11 degrees. If you look at that right-hand temperature listing on the right-hand side. You can also, if you want to look at it from a moisture standpoint, they have the ability to look at it from a, moisture content versus snow in inches. So you can look at it either way, but this tells the same story for that event. And then the last thing I want to point out are large events. So, these 2 events that you see highlighted here are football games here, and the counter is tracking usage of an underpass by bikes and pedestrians. And, just wanting to note the spike. This first game was on a Friday night, and you can see the spike through the underpass. And then the other one is on a Saturday, and so you can see this, much larger spike from a normal Saturday, which you can see back here, right? So again, being able to tell the story, your impact on the community, and then of course, hey, people are choosing to walk and ride their bike to the football game is a really positive story to tell. So I'll end there. And again, congrats to all those that are bike-friendly universities. Glad to be a part of the overall effort here. So I will unshare.
Thanks, Aaron. And yeah, Amelia and Matt, you're welcome to turn your videos on. And the rest of the participants are also.
Yeah, I'm going to launch the next poll. So while people are turning their cameras on, and I hope everybody feels like you can, and we'll also make it so that folks can unmute themselves. So here is the last question for our poll. Let's see. I'll give folks a couple minutes to respond to that while you are turning on your cameras. Otherwise, Olivia, feel free to take it away.
Sure. So yeah, we will wait a couple of seconds for people to respond to the poll. You can click multiple responses in there if you have multiple modes of data collection going on your campus, which I hope you do.
And also it only let me give 10 options. So if you have other things, feel free to put them in the chat. It was hard to pick just 10.
It's in the other poll we had, it looks like there's quite a bit of data collection going on in the participants that we have in this webinar. So that's great to hear. And it's, so I think it would be good to just start off. If there's anyone in the audience who has a specific question for one of our presenters, you can feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask that specific question now.
All right, Bill, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Great, thank you. Great presentations. I'm learning a lot. My specific question has to do with validating some of the count data, looking for best practices. We have a camera, the iTerra's Vantage system installed, and trying to think about good ways to validate the counts that are coming out of that. So if there's any best practices out there, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so Bill, I can't speak to that particular camera, but what we recommend for folks using our counters is to, certainly when you do the installation of the counter, to do a validation count that is like a manual survey count to make sure that what you see lines up with what the counter is taking, and any sort of like discrepancy between the two, you can add what's known as a correction factor, that is like multiplying the data by that particular error factor. And also it's, doing a validation count right at the beginning is kind of a nice way to capture some of that qualitative data too. So again, some of the things that I was talking about earlier, the helmet use, the perceived gender, and things like that. But we recommend a validation count at the beginning, and then every time you go and check on the counter also.
I would just add that with the automatic counters, you all should make a site visit, on some periodic basis. Vegetation changes, you may have like vegetation in the background that, when you put it in, there was a small little tree or a small bush that was put behind it. Often we've leveraged existing construction projects to try and get these counters put in. As vegetation matures, you may have false counts from, waving vegetation. We found that for certain. Sometimes we've had sport fields have changed too. We have one counter that's near a sport field that just got a lot more attention to it and caused us to take another look at it. So just best practice, make sure you get out there and look at your counters.
Before we
Erin.
get to the next question, I'm going to just share the results of the poll because it's kind of interesting to see. Lots of manual counts, lots of people who crash data. So take a look at that. All right, and then
I will now ask for Ed. Ed, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, this question is for Aaron. You know, I think the stories that you tell are compelling. And I think that's the important part. That's where you are able to bring, you know, this information to administrative, to leadership, to, you know, you know, put some context around it. What stories, are there any particular stories you think that have been most effective in creating some positive returns?
Good question, Ed. Thank you for saying that. Yes, I think stories. Well, first thing I would say is photos. Make sure that whatever statistical data you're pulling together or whatever automatic counts you're pulling together, gosh, you still remember you're working with people that are probably more visual than not. And having photos of known challenges or constricted trails or intersections that are just overwhelmed on your campuses, make sure you're grabbing photos to help tell your story, paired with, which is probably going to be some sort of graph or whatever else that you're depicting your data on. Leverage your student newspapers. Be willing to pitch stories to them. I think here at CSU, we've been very successful at having the university newspaper pick up stories related to data, either crash related data, count related data, and then some of our before and after stuff. They're always curious about projects that we've constructed and what was happening there before and after. So I think those are the most compelling stories I can come up with. And of course, if you can get your university leadership in terms of your president or chancellor to reference, the quantity of employees and students that are biking, I don't think there's any better story than that if you can get your president to acknowledge it. Thanks. Great question.
Thanks, Ed. And is there anyone else who is interested in asking a question to one of the presenters?
I have a question for Aaron, actually. Aaron, would you be willing to talk a little bit more about some of the snow clearing practices and how count data informs maintenance in the winter of that active transportation infrastructure? Something that's particularly interesting to me.
Sure. Well, I think when we first put the counters in, it really helped tell two stories. One, it helped bring additional resources to our plowing team here at CSU, making the case that not only our roads needed to be plowed, but that our trails should be prioritized because of the number of people that were actually using them post snow event. The second thing that occurred was, of course, we have a town-gown relationship to maintain, and we were able to work with the city and say, hey, look, could you align priority snow plowing routes along with ours so that we can message out to our community, here's your best chance to find a plowed route on a snow day off campus to get safely onto campus. And through that effort, I think we helped reprioritize some of the city routes and how they plow them. And I think, I would encourage all of you to have that conversation with your municipality, your streets department, about how and when they plow. In terms of resources internally, often trails on campuses, I think, are replacing potentially old roadways or alleyways. So being able to justify, an investment and a shift in who is going to be able to use a mode of transportation and who isn't. Your data helps, your counts help do that, and help support. Like one of our trails is a separated trail on campus. It used to be an old road, probably had 200 cars a day, and I've shown you a couple times. I've shown it in this graph, in graphs, and we're seeing 4,000 to 5,000 bikes at our peak times during the year per day, through that area, and it helps justify that. So snow plowing is one small component, but if you can get your trails cleared, and in Colorado, that's huge. If you do not get them cleared within a day, they are going to ice over, and it's going to be a huge deterrent if you don't get those things cleared off, because they're going to pack down. It's a little different than maybe East Coast snow or Northwest snow. It has the chance to get really icy and stick around for a while. So we like to encourage them by showing them this data and that they've been successful because they plowed for us and increased bicycle ridership.
Thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Aaron. I have a couple of questions I was going to ask generally to the audience. So we saw earlier when we were looking at some of the attendees in the first poll, there's some participants from local governments. So I was wondering if there was anyone in the audience who had a story or a lesson they wanted to speak about in terms of collaborating with local governments. So how universities can collaborate with the municipal government or regional government to advance data collection efforts associated with cycling. So Aaron spoke about this a little bit in terms of the tabling exercises, but is there anyone in the audience who has like a story to tell about working with like campus and municipal relations for data collection? And Aaron, you can also elaborate. I was really interested in that part of your presentation. I wish we had more time to spend on it.
I've got a bunch, but let's see if anybody else weighs in here. All right, well, I'll give you a couple and let's see if somebody else hops in. Gosh, I think universities have a lot to offer their municipality in terms of collaboration. One of them might be if you have an engineering college or university or a department. Every year we have senior engineering design capstone projects. I have 3 of them this year, and they're all bike related projects. Have the student engineers go out and do counts and intercept interviews of bicyclists and pedestrians using infrastructure that you're designing. We've designed roundabouts, trails, intersections, protected intersections. And each time we've had those engineers go out and do stakeholder engagement that include counts. That's a really good one. If you're doing a manual bike count, make sure the city is also counting locations on your campus. That's really important. Grant applications. If you're not applying for grants with your municipality, you're probably losing some weight in terms of how seriously you're taking your grant application. We have a strong relationship with the city of Fort Collins, and it brought in hundreds, millions of dollars really together because we collect data together prior to our submissions. And then share, from an EcoCounter standpoint, share your counters together. Make sure the city has access to yours and vice versa, and make sure your counters are part of their deployment plan. So we share our counts together. We're not trying to keep them close to the vest. So how about other ideas? Anybody else out there have good town-gown relationship data sharing?
Robert?
Yeah. Robert, do you want to unmute yourself?
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm from Delaware, which is about the smallest place you can ever imagine. And I live in the city where the University of Delaware is. We cooperate all the time because probably half the city staff are university alums. But one of the interesting things we did in terms of data collection, which is not much, we were able to use COVID emergency funds to fund some counts, camera counts on our bike trails, which is the first data that we've really collected. We managed to get some folks from one of our local engineering spin-offs to do that for us, and they collected the data and were paid under the emergency funds for COVID. So one little thing that we've done. That's just the beginning, and we're hoping that will continue.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Farnaz, do you want to unmute yourself? Oh, you're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I've been having trouble with Zoom audio today. I think JC was before me, but I'm jumping ahead, JC, sorry. I actually have a different perspective from what has been spoken about. I am not part of the administration of the university. I'm a professor in civil engineering department. But I have jumped on a couple of opportunities to collaborate with the City of Calgary. I'm from University of Calgary. So we do have a fair amount of snow in Calgary, and we have that snow plowing issues. And I have jumped on a couple of collaborating opportunities where the counting that we provided helped the city make decisions about investing in cycle tracks in City of Calgary. So I have engaged, I've done a variety of work, but starting from engaging students at the undergrad level at data collection because they learn about it. We've had graduate course projects where they have done the analysis and we have presented that to the city. We have had the senior projects, we call it capstone projects. As a result of that, we have had graduate students who have done their master's and PhD student on developing prediction models based on the data that we have collected from the collectors that we've had from the city. So very, very successful collaboration with the City of Calgary, but not from administration perspective. And I'm learning a lot today from what I'm hearing, because one of the things I'd like to do is to approach our administration at the university and to encourage them to incorporate that, because I don't think we have a lot of practices on campus yet, but I may be oblivious to that. But yeah, this has been my experience, wanted to share.
Thanks, Farnaz. JC, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Just to kind of add on to what everybody else is saying is I really use and abuse my School of Geography and Urban Planning. So I've been working with them for about 5 or 6 years now, and a few items I've had them do for me is I've actually had them do my reapplication for the League of American Cyclists. So don't tell anybody. So yeah, so that was great, and they really gathered all the data, did all the bike counts and that type of thing. I think the next project I'm really excited about is we're actually doing a GIS map of all of our different modes of transportation all throughout the city. And so that way we can kind of really work to really target message those people if they're within that 1 to 3 miles, they can bike, walk, and those types of things, and near the light rail corridor, get on the light rail corridor. And so I'm really excited about that, and then kind of doing that on a yearly basis, which I talked them into doing that, where we'll have a class or a student keep track of that on a yearly basis so we can see our year-over-year improvement. And of course, we always share all this information with City of Tempe because we really work together where you really can't tell where ASU starts and City of Tempe begins. So we try to connect everything with our bikes, pads, and work really closely, so much so that I'm actually the chair of their the transportation committee. So I get to have a little foot in the door with the City of Tempe that way and really make sure that we're all on the same page, which we generally are, which is really nice. But so yeah, yeah, especially if you're part of a university, professors and students love real world data. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir for Fernand's, but yeah, real world data really gets them excited. So I'm always happy to help with that. Plus they help me out.
Thanks, JC. If there's anyone else who would like to join in the conversation, you're welcome to. Amelia, for the resources that will be shared at the end of the session, is that going to be sent out in an email to the attendees?
Yeah, so I'm going to put the link in the chat again. So here is a folder that has a bunch of files that both Matt and I referenced in our presentations of sort of real plans and survey reports from schools and communities. So check that out. It links to a Google Drive folder, so you can download those. And we'll also add a PDF of all the slides from today. And then you can also, we'll send an email out to everyone who registered to attend, but on the League blog in the next day or two, we'll be posting the recording from today, as well as a link to all of these resources. So bikeleague.org, keep an eye out for that. And thanks to Raven in the audience who's going to write that blog. So yeah, I definitely welcome any other questions via email. The BFU program is here as a resource for schools looking to improve their bike counts and improve their ridership on campus and safety. So looking forward to working with all of you to make those improvements. And I really want to thank EcoCounter for partnering with us this year to support the BFU program and helping to figure out how universities and colleges need better support for bike counts. So thanks all for being here, and thanks to EcoCounter for co-hosting today. And a huge thanks to Aaron for sharing the awesome story. It's great to be reminded why you guys are a platinum level bicycle friendly university. so many great activities on the CSU campus. I'll turn it back to you, Olivia, if you have anything else.
Thanks, Amelia. No, I just wanted to say thanks to all the presenters, everyone who attended today and contributed to the session. I hope everyone learned something, and definitely check out the link that Amelia sent. There's lots and lots of really cool case studies. I think we can close up the meeting now. So yes, thanks for everyone for attending, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Bye.